Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Recently, the idea that the overall Harry Potter narrative is missing a story told from Draco Malfoy's perspective has been gaining traction. It's said that such a story would enrich the tapestry of intertwined fates and events, and perhaps there is some truth to that. So today, we will try to experience a couple of years at Hogwarts through the eyes of one of the most popular Slytherins. Let's start with some broad strokes of his portrait. Draco Malfoy was fortunate to be born into one of the wealthiest magical families in the world, and from an early age, he was used to never denying himself anything. At Hogwarts, he is quite popular among his peers, serving as a prefect for his house and a seeker on the Quidditch team. Moreover, it turns out that Snape also favors him over the other students. All in all, it may seem that Draco Malfoy's life is perfect. But despite all of the above, we cannot, unfortunately, call the sole heir of the Malfoy family truly happy. At least, not until a certain point. If we look at the facts from a slightly different angle, we can see that Draco was born into a family that, if we step away from the surface-level attributes, began to lose its sense of direction at some point. Simply put, the Malfoys are on the wrong side of understanding what is right and what is wrong. Lucius supports Voldemort, genuinely believes in the superiority of purebloods, considers himself better than others, and uses various manipulative and coercive methods to achieve his political goals. Unfortunately, we must admit that each of these tactics is misguided, as the magical world is rapidly changing. And when we return to Draco, we now understand that his life was essentially pre-planned by someone else, designed for him to replicate and propagate the principles and ideals of the Malfoy family. But why and how did this happen? Draco was raised with the constant reminder that he was better than everyone else, and that his family had an inherent superiority over others. How could he not start to believe he was number one in this world when he was reminded of it daily? Now, if Draco had interacted more with his peers, he might have had the chance to hear different opinions about himself, or see their reactions to his behavior. But no, here lies the problem. Yes, I understand that the Malfoys hosted social events with families like the Parkinsons, Goyles, Crabs, Knotts, and possibly the Zabinis, where Draco could have met his future classmates. However, at such gatherings, not only do the children, but sometimes even the adults, barely exchange more than a few words with each other. And considering that the Malfoys aren't exactly the type to spend a few weeks on a beach vacation with friends, there likely weren't many other opportunities for the young aristocrats to meet. Moreover, even if the Malfoys did socialize with others, those people undoubtedly shared their values and worldview. Additionally, the Malfoys lived in a huge, secluded mansion, so the chances of Draco having a casual chat with the locals were close to zero. So, can you imagine how limited the world of pure-blood aristocracy is? How self-contained it is? Draco Malfoy simply had no chance to live or behave differently. Throughout his childhood, he absorbed his father's mannerisms and worldview, thinking that was how one should live and behave in the magical community. Now, for example, Harry, unknowingly, ruined all of the Malfoys' plans. Draco thought that when he arrived at Hogwarts, he would become a star of the highest magnitude, as his parents had led him to believe. But then, surprise, surprise, the famous Harry Potter with his long trail of glory shows up. In short, Draco was just unlucky to be the same age as Harry and to start at Hogwarts at the same time. If they had been separated by even just 1 year, Harry's fame wouldn't have overshadowed Draco as much. But as it was, all the attention was focused on Harry. So, what strategy does Draco choose? That's right. He starts to double down on promoting his family's values, and tries even harder to prove it through his behavior, relying heavily on his father's authority in various situations. In other words, Draco solves problems not by using his own potential, but by invoking his father's status and influence. But everything begins to change after Draco takes on the task of killing Dumbledore. This is the first time he is faced with a serious problem that he can't hide behind the status of his family to solve. This time, he has to do everything on his own, and he must win this battle for his family's life and his own. Draco begins to realize how difficult this battle is. He is completely alone, and, strangely enough, this isolation becomes, in a way, his salvation, and a chance to finally look inward and honestly ask himself, do I really want to live this way? And where, in all this whirlwind of principles and actions, is my true self? Finally, Draco Malfoy sees the world not through the prism of his father's views, but through his own understanding of what is happening. Only through this experience can he open his eyes to see things as they truly are, and begin to understand on which side the truth lies, the truth worth fighting for. This is likely the point of no return, after which Draco begins to retreat from the dark side of the battle. Yes, Draco took the Dark Mark. Yes, he let Death Eaters into Hogwarts. But the price for that was enormous. Voldemort does not forgive his followers' mistakes. If we recall, Draco's almost impossible task is essentially a punishment for all of Lucius's failures. So a 16-year-old boy is living a real nightmare for almost an entire year, not because of his own mistakes, but because he is atoning for someone else's. Yes, Draco managed to get the Death Eaters into Hogwarts, but he can't bring himself to kill Dumbledore. Why? Certainly not because he doesn't know how to do it. Of course he does. No, he can't do it simply because, after a year of living under Voldemort's influence, he starts to realize that the bad guys are not really the ones Lucius has been setting him against all this time. We see how Draco desperately clings to the past, to his old system of values, trying to convince himself that he's on the right side. The conversation between Draco and Dumbledore on the astronomy tower is fascinating. At one point, Dumbledore even offers Draco protection and sanctuary if he agrees to switch sides, and you get the impression that Draco is seriously considering it, ready to join Dumbledore. He is truly in doubt, and even starts to lower his wand. But at that moment, the Death Eaters arrive, forcing him to take up his original position once again. There is another moment that highlights the fundamental difference between Draco and Lucius. In the 6th book, Draco uses Peruvian instant darkness powder, invented by Fred and George, borrows some ideas from Dumbledore's army, and uses Hermione's knowledge that Filch can't detect potions. If we look closely, many of the strategies that helped Draco in his task came from the opposing side, from his so-called enemies. The fact that Draco acknowledges that the opposition might be better at something sets him apart from the other Death Eaters, who are too proud and arrogant to admit that Dumbledore's supporters might surpass them in some ways. This proves that Draco holds broader views and is free from the narrow-mindedness that Lucius is guilty of. Another example supporting this point is when Draco first spoke to Harry in Madame Malkin's shop before their first year at Hogwarts. At that moment, Draco didn't care that Harry was dressed in shabby Muggle clothes. He simply wanted to share the excitement of starting a new school year with a fellow first-year student like himself. So, Draco changes. He hates Voldemort, he sees the true nature of things, and he understands who really deserves to win this war. Before our eyes, an invisible inner struggle unfolds within Draco Malfoy's soul. We witness this when Draco lies and doesn't give away Harry at Malfoy Manor, or when he stops Crabbe from casting the killing curse on Harry in the Room of Requirement. Finally, in the concluding scene of the saga, Draco and Harry exchange friendly glances, as they send their children off to Hogwarts, showing that their old school rivalry is long behind them. Honestly, this is what often feels missing from the whole narrative arc.
We want to see the full path of Draco's inner transformation in detail, not just in passing. To understand why we aren't surprised that, by the end of the 7th book, both characters appear not as rivals with a 7-year feud behind them, but at least as old acquaintances. When we understand the circumstances and inner conflicts that shaped Draco Malfoy throughout the story, it becomes easier to see him not only as an antagonist, but also as a victim of circumstances. His mistakes, though significant, are driven by family expectations, fear of Voldemort, and pressure from those around him. However, to fully grasp how complex and deserving of forgiveness this character is, we must look at how Draco is portrayed in different media, books and films. It's important to understand which Draco feels more relatable to us, the one we see on the pages of the novels, or the one brought to life on screen by Tom Felton. The specifics of literature and film. In the Harry Potter books, the story is presented through Harry's perspective, which immediately creates a one-sided view of many characters, especially Draco Malfoy. From the very beginning, Harry sees him as a rival and enemy. In their first encounter on the Hogwarts Express, Draco offers Harry his friendship, but he does so with such arrogance and disdain for Ron that Harry immediately rejects him. This scene sets the foundation for their antagonism, and with each new encounter in the books, Harry sees Draco only as a smug and malicious boy. Because of this bias, Draco often comes across as a caricatured villain. In Chamber of Secrets, he mocks Hermione by calling her a mudblood, which further strengthens the negative impression. Every action Draco takes is viewed through a negative lens by Harry. We only see an arrogant and cowardly youth who clings to his pure blood status and looks down on everyone below him in the magical hierarchy.
Draco's line, "Next time get a better book," is not just an expression of his arrogance, but also a sign of his inability to see people beyond their social status. However, we rarely glimpse Draco's inner world from his own perspective in the books. It's as if he is always playing the role of the villain that Harry assigns him. But starting from Goblet of Fire, there are signs that Draco is more complex. He is experiencing deep inner conflict, though we can only speculate because Harry isn't particularly interested in understanding his enemy. In the films, on the other hand, the audience is given the chance to see Draco differently. The camera isn't limited to one point of view. We see Draco interacting not only with Harry, but with other characters as well. In scenes where Harry isn't present, we observe Draco's daily life, during lessons, at meals in the Great Hall. These moments create the sense that Draco is not just an enemy, but a teenager with his own problems. A vivid example of this is the scenes in the 6th film, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. We see Draco under immense pressure from his family and Lord Voldemort. His attempts to repair the vanishing cabinet in the Room of Requirement demonstrate not only his determination, but also his fear. In this moment, Draco appears vulnerable, not just evil. We see him struggling with a task that is beyond him, but upon which his life and the lives of his loved ones depend. In the books, these moments are mentioned briefly through Harry's suspicions, but in the film, Tom Felton brings an emotional depth to Draco that is hard to convey in words. In the scene on the astronomy tower, when Draco is standing before Dumbledore with his wand raised, despair is written on his face. He can't bring himself to kill, no matter how hard he tries, and this weakness makes him more human. The films allow the audience to see Draco in moments of weakness, when he is alone with his fears. In the scene where he cries in the bathroom, his vulnerability becomes clear, evoking sympathy. He is no longer just a schoolyard bully, but a person trapped in circumstances that have overwhelmed him. Tom Felton's portrayal of Draco Malfoy played a crucial role in how we perceive the character in the films. In the books, Draco's character remains fairly one-dimensional, despite some development, particularly in the final parts. However, Felton infused his character not only with arrogance and a mocking tone, but with a whole range of emotions that deepened his character. Thanks to this, Draco is no longer just a bully, but a complex individual with inner conflicts. One striking example of Felton's skill is the scene in Half-Blood Prince, where Draco looks at Harry on the Hogwarts Express. This moment is filled with tension. In his gaze, we see not just the usual disdain, but something new: anxiety, fear of what lies ahead.
Felton conveys this through subtle gestures, tight lips, nervous finger movements. His performance makes us feel that behind the mask of coolness, growing doubts are emerging. The scene on the astronomy tower is another example of how Felton makes Draco a multi-layered character. At this moment, Draco is supposed to kill Dumbledore, but he can't. He holds the wand, but despair is written on his face. Felton plays this scene with such depth that the audience understands this isn't just fear of committing murder. It's the rift between duty and conscience. His gaze flickers as if he hopes someone will stop him, save him from making this choice. In this moment, Draco stops being a coward and becomes a teenager caught in tragic circumstances. Equally important is the bathroom scene, when Harry accidentally finds Draco crying. This is one of the most emotional scenes in the film. Here, Felton reveals the vulnerability of the character, which is barely noticeable in the books. The tears Draco tries to hide show just how tormented and broken he is. This isn't just a moment of weakness. It's the culmination of an internal crisis. Harry catches him in his most defenseless state, and it shatters the previous image of the arrogant aristocrat. In these scenes where emotions play a key role, Felton literally brings Draco's inner turmoil to life. His glances, gestures, and even his breathing all work to show his internal struggle. Perhaps one of the most impressive aspects of his performance is how he conveys fear and uncertainty through physical tension. We see how tense he is, how his movements become less confident, and this lets the audience understand just how difficult things are for him. The costumes also deserve special attention, as they play a significant role in how Draco is perceived on screen. In the films, his outfits are always dark and restrained, which highlights his closed-off and tense nature. In the scenes on the astronomy tower and in the room of requirement, his costume is black, formal, and has a high collar. This not only emphasizes his connection to the Malfoy family, but also symbolizes his internal rigidity and his unwillingness to open up to the world. Interestingly, in the bathroom duel scene, Draco's costume appears more vulnerable. The white shirt under the black jacket, when Harry attacks him with Sectum Sempra, seems to emphasize his fragility. As the blood gushes from his wounds, the contrast with the white fabric makes Draco appear especially defenseless in the eyes of the viewer. This isn't just about aesthetics. It's a visual language that heightens the drama of the scene. In the books, Draco Malfoy initially represents pure blood magic and all its conservative values. He takes pride in his lineage and openly despises those who don't fit into his narrow worldview. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, his disdain for Hermione, whom he calls a mudblood, demonstrates his extreme loyalty to the ideals of pure-blood supremacy. These ideas were instilled in him by his family, especially his father, Lucius Malfoy. Young Malfoy essentially serves as a mirror for his father's beliefs, aggressively defending these views throughout the early books. However, this portrayal is quite flat. In the first books, Draco often seems like nothing more than a spiteful, annoying boy who bullies Hermione, Ron, and Harry. He mocks them, hurls insults, and always hides behind others, like his cronies, Crabbe and Goyle. In Chamber of Secrets, he again displays his disdain, but also his cowardice. He never confronts Harry one-on-one.
This solidifies his reputation as both a coward and a bully. But as the story progresses, Draco's character starts to evolve. Beginning with Goblet of Fire, we see that Draco is not so simple. It is during this period that his internal struggle begins to emerge. He feels uncomfortable with the looming threat of the Dark Lord, though he continues to cling to old ideas. In Half-Blood Prince, this internal conflict reaches its peak. Draco faces a task he cannot complete: the assassination of Dumbledore. Fear of Voldemort and responsibility for his family paralyze him, and he becomes much more complex than just a villain. His inability to fulfill Voldemort's order is a clear sign of the inner battle he is going through. In the book, Dumbledore notices his hesitation and even says, "You're cornered, Draco. You have a choice." These words reveal that beneath the mask of a cold-hearted executor is a young man who fears for his life and the lives of his loved ones. Draco begins to understand that his father's ideals are destructive, and this awareness becomes an important part of his evolution. In the films, this complexity is deepened. Directors and screenwriters removed some scenes where Draco would have appeared pitiful or cartoonish. For example, in the books, he often says things that paint him as a coward and a bully, but in the films, such moments are cut. Instead, we see his more complicated relationship with his mother. In scenes where he interacts with Narcissa Malfoy, we see how much he relies on her support. This is especially evident in the moment when Draco accompanies her to Borgin and Berks. This episode shows that his family ties are deeper than merely following pure-blood traditions. The films also add a separate plot arc with his attempts to fix the Vanishing Cabinet, through which we see his internal conflict. In the book, this storyline is present but doesn't focus on Draco's emotions. In the film, however, his desperation and determination are conveyed through Tom Felton's facial expressions and gestures, which vividly depict Draco's nervous tension. One of the key scenes is the moment on the astronomy tower when Draco faces Dumbledore with his wand raised. In the book, this scene is powerful due to the dialogue, but in the film, all the attention is on the emotions. Draco doesn't look like a cold-blooded killer. He looks like a boy trapped by circumstances. His face is full of despair and fear, and the viewer understands that he isn't a villain, but a victim. Tom Felton masterfully portrays the fine line between determination and horror in this scene. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. I hope this means you found it interesting. If so, don't forget to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel.